What is up, Scream Team? Zach Cherry here, and did you know that the Halloween franchise is actually made up of 5 different timeline configurations? That means that there are multiple different ways you can enjoy these movies, making this series sort of like a choose-your-own-adventure. As of right now, there are 13 films in the franchise in total. Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, Halloween H2O, Halloween Resurrection, Rob Zombie's Halloween and Halloween 2, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and most recently, Halloween Ends. Now, it is important to note that even though these movies make up 5 separate timelines, the Halloween franchise is also comprised of 3 cinematic universes. So we're first going to need to recognize the difference between each one of those in order to better understand any sort of chronological baseline. The first one we'll go over, which is probably the most straightforward and easiest to understand, is the Rob Zombie remake universe, which only comprises of the one timeline. Although it's never specified exactly which years these movies' events are taking place in, at least in terms of the Rob Zombie director's cuts, which for the sake of this video will be canon, it is widely agreed that the main body of the 2007 remake is set concurrently in the present day, which would mean that the sequences set in the past, which we see at the beginning of the movie, are all taking place in the year 1990. In this section of the movie, Michael, who is already killing small animals, first begins his murder spree of humans when he targets a bully from school on his way home on the afternoon of October 31st. Later that night, after his mother leaves for her job at the Rabbit and Red strip club, his sister Judith blows off plans to take him trick-or-treating when her boyfriend comes over to the house instead. Being left to his own devices, Michael decides to murder his mother's abusive boyfriend, who had passed out drunk in front of the TV, as well as Judith's boyfriend, whose mask he later on wears to go upstairs and murder Judith. After burying the mask under the house, Michael takes his baby sister Angel outside and waits for their mom to come home to discover the bodies. After this, Michael is immediately placed in Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where he is put under the psychiatric care of Dr. Sam Loomis, who over the course of the next 2 years documents Michael becoming more and more withdrawn from his own humanity. In 1992, Michael's mother visits him at Smith's Grove for the last time, as after witnessing Michael murder a nurse with a fork, she ends up taking her own life upon returning home from the hospital. Responding to the report of a gunshot, future Haddonfield Sheriff Lee Brackett rescues 2-year-old Angel Myers from the scene and omits her from the police report, placing her into adoptive care himself so that she can grow up without ever having to bear the stigma of the Myers name. Angel is eventually adopted by the Strodes, who change her name to Laurie, while Michael spends the next 15 years at Smith's Grove without ever speaking another word. In 2007, a now 27-year-old Michael escapes from Smith's Grove on the night before Halloween, killing hospital staff and a truck driver in the process before returning to his childhood home, which has been abandoned ever since his mother's suicide. He then locates and stalks a now 17-year-old Laurie, where he murders her adoptive parents after she leaves for the night to babysit Tommy Doyle. He also kills Laurie's friend Linda and Linda's boyfriend Bob, and after attempting to kill her other friend Annie, he kidnaps Laurie and brings her back to the Myers house. He tries to show her through an old photograph that they are brother and sister, but she's unable to understand him, and after stabbing him with a knife, tries to get away. Loomis eventually shows up to rescue her, unsuccessfully, and it isn't until Laurie uses his gun to shoot Michael that the unstoppable killing force is temporarily put down. Picking up immediately after this in the remake sequel, Michael is taken to a morgue in another county. However, on the way there, the attendants run into a cow, and a still-living Michael is able to escape, where despite any sort of concrete evidence of his body's known whereabouts, the authorities declare Michael to be dead. 2 years later, again going by the director's cut canon, Laurie is now living with the Bracketts while having reoccurring nightmares of the traumatic events for which she is in therapy for and taking heavy dosages of medication. Michael, who has been living as a drifter, is met with visions of his dead mother, who instructs him to go back home to his sister so they can all be a family again. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis has been profiteering off of the 2007 tragedy and has written a tell-all book about Michael's history, which includes the revelation that Laurie Strode is actually Angel Myers. Laurie finds out and is sent into a downward spiral, while Michael slowly makes his way back to Haddonfield, killing anyone who gets in his way, including Annie and all of Laurie's new friends. Michael once again kidnaps Laurie, and this time takes her to an abandoned shed on some farmland, where Loomis, in an attempt to atone for the damage he's created, comes to Laurie's rescue, only to get killed by Michael, who finally speaks to him. The police surround the shed and kill Michael, but Laurie is shot by accident, and this time timeline comes to an end where she presumably dies having a vision of herself being visited by her mother in an asylum. The next universe we'll be covering is made up of the Anthology Timeline, which only covers the events of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, as that was the only entry that was ever produced in John Carpenter's planned future for the series, in which every new movie would detail a different horror story taking place on the night of Halloween. Because this was commercially unsuccessful, the producers eventually went back to making movies about Michael Myers, leaving Season of the Witch as the only entry in the Halloween franchise that doesn't feature Michael Myers as a character. Set in 1982 during the week leading up to Halloween, the film follows Dr. Dan Chalice, who witnesses a mysterious murder-suicide involving a patient who was admitted to his hospital while clutching onto a novelty Halloween mask. After meeting with the man's daughter, Chalice agrees to travel up the coast with her to follow their one and only lead of investigating the small town of Santa Mira, which is home to the factory which produces the masks. After a series of strange occurrences, Chalice eventually uncovers the grisly truth that the factory's owner, Connell Cochran, is actually a powerful warlock who intends to murder all of the children of America as part of a Samhain ritual. He explains to Chalice that he has harnessed the dark powers of Stonehenge through a microchip on the back of each mask, which will be activated during a televised commercial that will be nationally broadcast on Halloween night. Chalice is able to escape and destroy the factory, but he has a little more difficulty getting the commercial pulled off the air, and the movie ends ambiguously as the whimsical Silver Shamrock music plays over his horrified screams. Because there were no other anthology movies, this timeline is pretty straightforward in and of itself. However, I separate this into its own universe for the mind-boggling fact that there are promotional ads for the original Halloween playing within the movie, with the characters later on even watching the entire feature on TV. This would seem to suggest that Season of the Witch actually exists in the same universe inhabited by all of us, the viewer. And since the Silver Shamrock masks do show up again in Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, it could either suggest one of two things. The first being that the Silver Shamrock Corporation had failed in their 1982 Samhain ritual, but has still remained a successful novelty business, and in a very meta approach for the Halloween franchise, had provided the masks to Blumhouse Studio as props to use during the productions of the new Halloween films. The other way you can look at it is as more of a paradox, in which Season of the Witch does exist in the same universe inhabited by Michael Myers, despite the fact that as a movie, Halloween already exists in the same universe in which Season of the Witch takes place, meaning that the trick-or-treaters we see in 2018 were fans of Season of the Witch and had their parents buy them Silver Shamrock masks to go out on Halloween night. It's best not to overthink it, but we can probably all agree that whatever the case may be, this does not share any sort of timeline connection with any of the other Halloween movies. But now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, we can start to focus on the main universe, which also happens to be the most complicated one, as this comprises of 3 timelines that all have the distinction of linking back to the very first Halloween movie, which came out in 1978. To make this easier to understand, I'm going to classify them separately as the Loomis Timeline, the Laurie Timeline, and the Michael Timeline, as those are the characters with the most prominent narrative throughout each respective sequence of movies. Starting with the Loomis Timeline, this covers the events of Halloween's 1 to 2, followed by the Return, the Revenge, and the Curse of Michael Myers. The earliest events shown take place on Halloween night of 1963, where a 6-year-old Michael Myers watches from outside of his house as his older sister Judith goes upstairs with her boyfriend before creeping inside and taking a large kitchen knife out of a drawer. The boyfriend, however, was just there for a shoot and scoot, and as soon as he takes off, Michael proceeds to walk upstairs to Judith's bedroom, where he stabs her in the chest before walking out to the front yard as his parents arrive home. At face value, the events depicted in 1963 occur in each one of the 3 main timelines. However, there is additional background information which delineates a much different history for the Myers family prior to Michael's killing of Judith, specifically in the number of children that Peter and Edith Myers had procreated. In both the Loomis and Laurie timelines, the couple had 3 children, which in addition to Judith and Michael, who respectively were born in 1947 and 1957, they also had daughter Cynthia, who was born in 1961. It isn't made entirely clear where Cynthia was during the time of Judith's murder, but if we read between the lines from information revealed later on in the franchise, we can surmise that she was being babysat along with Michael by Mrs. Blankenship, who lived in the house across the street from the Myers. After Judith's murder, Michael seemingly slipped into a catatonic state where he was placed in Smith's Grove Sanitarium under the psychiatric care of Dr. Sam Loomis. After spending the next 6 months observing the child, Dr. Loomis concludes that Michael's catatonic state was merely an act and warns that he's consciously preparing for something bigger. In May of 1964, Loomis appeared before the hospital's psychiatric board to appeal their decision to keep Michael at Smith's Grove, as he believed his patient should instead be locked away in a maximum security facility. They deny his appeal but allow him to continue to serve as Michael's doctor, a position he would continue to hold on to for the next 15 years. The following year, in January of 1965, Michael's parents, who had previously moved out of their house following Judith's murder, are both involved in a fatal automobile accident, leaving the now 4-year-old Cynthia Myers an orphan. Cynthia is placed in foster care, where she is soon adopted by the Strodes, who change her name to Laurie and request that the records of her adoption be sealed in order to protect the family. Fast forwarding now to 13 years later, on the night before his arraignment to be tried as an adult for the murder of his sister, 21-year-old Michael Myers breaks out of Smith's Grove and makes his way back towards Haddonfield in a stolen hospital transport station wagon. He murders a mechanic along the way to trade in his hospital gown for some coveralls, and breaks into a hardware store in town to steal a Halloween mask and a kitchen knife. After a now 17-year-old Laurie is tasked by her real estate agent father to drop a key off at the Myers house, Michael spots his long-lost sister and begins stalking her all throughout the day, following her to school and later on as she walks home with her friends Annie and Linda. Meanwhile, Loomis has arrived in Haddonfield, and after discovering that Judith Myers' headstone had been taken, he alerts the local sheriff Lee Brackett of Michael's escape and the imminent threat that he may pose to his town. Laurie and Annie go off to their babysitting jobs for the night, which happen to be across the street from one another, but after Annie makes plans for her boyfriend Paul to come over, she gets Laurie to look after her charge, Lindsay Wallace, and while preparing to drive over to pick up Paul, Michael surprises her from the backseat of her car where he violently strangles her before slashing her throat. Linda eventually arrives with her boyfriend Bob to find the house completely empty, and after having sex in the upstairs bedroom, Michael dispatches of them as well. Feeling that something is off, Laurie leaves the children to walk across the street to investigate, and after discovering the bodies of her friends, she's attacked by Michael and chased back across the street. Loomis, who noticed the stolen station wagon while roaming around the neighborhood, locates Michael when he hears the scream of the children. He's able to save Laurie by shooting Michael 6 times, causing him to fall off an upstairs balcony, but when he goes to check the body immediately afterwards, Michael has already gotten up and has seemingly disappeared into the night. Now, let's just put a pin in this spot right here, because this is a very important moment that we're eventually going to come back to. Moving along, however, in 1981's Halloween 2, the events pick up immediately following Michael's disappearance as Loomis continues his frantic search for his patient on the same night of Halloween 1978. Meanwhile, a now injured Michael has fled to the back alleys of Haddonfield, where after murdering a local teenager whose house he breaks into, follows Laurie to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, where he slowly takes out all of the staff and security. Back in town, Sheriff Brackett grows increasingly annoyed by Loomis's reckless behavior and cavalier attitude towards his authority, which indirectly kills Ben Tramer, a local high schooler who was wearing a similar mask to Michael. This causes the media to speculate that Michael is dead. However, Laurie, who has just woken up following her surgery, feels that the boogeyman is still coming for her, which triggers an early childhood memory in which she realizes that she is in fact Michael's younger sister. Brackett resigns his post to his deputy after discovering that his daughter Annie was among the victims from earlier in the night, and after Loomis convinces everyone to keep looking for Michael, he is ordered back to Smith's Grove when Nurse Marion Chambers shows up in Haddonfield with a state marshal. It's here where Loomis is told about Michael and Laurie's sibling connection, which had previously been sealed in confidential files, and realizing that Michael has returned home to go after his sister, hijacks the marshal's car, forcing him to take them to the hospital. Loomis arrives in time to save Laurie, who had just been stalked by Michael, but after the doctor fails to kill him with another round of bullets, they're chased further into the facility where they become cornered inside a small operating room. As Michael forces his way in, Laurie blinds him using Loomis's revolver, and after the two of them fill the room with oxygen and ether, she makes a run for it as Loomis attempts to self-immolate while Michael is still inside. Laurie watches from a distance as Michael's body is engulfed in flames, and the following morning she is placed in the back of an ambulance and driven away as she reflects on the nightmare she just survived. Following the events at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, both Michael and Loomis are found alive, but very badly burned. Michael has now fallen into a coma, where he's housed at Ridgemont Federal Sanitarium, with Loomis continuing to act as his psychiatrist. Laurie goes on to complete her final year of high school, where just before graduating, discovers that she's pregnant. It's unclear if the father is Jimmy, who had also survived the hospital massacre and was shown in the ambulance with Laurie during the television cut's ending, but in any event, the two get married, and on January 30th of 1980, Laurie gives birth to daughter Jamie Lloyd. The family remains in Haddonfield for the better part of the next 8 years until November 30th, 1987, when Laurie and her husband die in an unspecified accident. Jamie is then sent to live with Richard and Darlene Carruthers, whose teenage daughter Rachel had been babysit by Laurie years earlier. This will then bring us to the events of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, which opens less than a year later on October 30th, 1988, as the still seemingly comatose Michael is picked up at Ridgemont for transfer to Smith's Grove. During the drive, Michael, who had been faking his coma, attacks and kills the ambulance attendants when he overhears them talking about his niece Jamie. From there, he makes his way to Haddonfield with Dr. Loomis in hot pursuit, where the following day Rachel takes Jamie to the drugstore to get a Halloween costume, where she's drawn to a similar clown outfit that her uncle had worn back when he killed his sister in 1963. Michael, who has also shown up at the drugstore, steals a mask, and after running into Jamie, follows her and Rachel home to confirm his suspicion that she is indeed his niece. That night, he stalks Rachel and Jamie through the streets of Haddonfield, and after Loomis arrives in town to alert the new sheriff, Ben Meeker, they all coalesce at Meeker's house, where Michael has already made a covert entry. He manages to kill most of Jamie's protective circle, but after she and Rachel narrowly escape, they're rescued by a vigilante mob who are out hunting for Michael. They drive them out of town to safety, but Michael has stowed his way aboard the ride, and after running into the entrance of an old abandoned mine, state troopers arrive on the scene to blast Michael into oblivion. Rachel and Jamie return home, but soon after, Jamie becomes infected by her uncle's evil essence and attempts to murder her foster mother with a pair of scissors, while Dr. Loomis looks on in terror. Meanwhile, shown to us in the opening scene of Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, Michael has escaped death when he manages to crawl out of the mine shaft and into a river, where he winds up floating down to a hermit's shack on the outskirts of town. He's taken in by the hermit, and over the course of the next year, he slowly heals from his injuries and rebuilds his strength. At the same time, Jamie, who has fallen mute and been sent to live at a children's clinic in town, continues to experience a telepathic bond with her uncle when she has visions of him waking up and returning to Haddonfield. Despite her best efforts, Rachel and her friends are killed, causing Loomis to set a trap at the old Myers house, using Jamie as bait. The Mad Doctor is successful in his efforts, but suffers a major stroke in the process, and no sooner is Michael placed in police custody than a mysterious man in black breaks him out of prison and kidnaps Jamie in the process. Later revealed to be Dr. Terrence Wynn, an old associate of Dr. Loomis's and the current head of Smith's Grove, he plans on harnessing the power of Thorn, which is believed to be the root cause of Michael's evil, in order to use it for experimental DNA testing to uncover a medical breakthrough. Michael and Jamie are held captive in a subsection of Smith's Grove for the next 6 years, where sometime in early 1995, Jamie becomes impregnated by either Michael, Dr. Wynn, or a random cult member. It's never actually made expressly clear who. However, it is heavily implied to be Michael in the producer's cut of the film, which for all intents and purposes will not be canon for this video. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis has recovered from his stroke and retired from medicine, while Laurie Strode's adoptive uncle John takes over the family's real estate business and moves into the Myers house with wife Deborah and son Tim, as neither he or his brother were ever able to successfully sell the property. They're soon joined by their estranged daughter Kara, who shows up with her 10-year-old son Danny, who appears to suffer from the same visions that Michael did when he was a young boy. This will bring us to Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, which begins on October 30th of that same year. Jamie delivers a baby boy and, with the help of her midwife, is able to escape from Smith's Grove. However, Michael gets out too and follows Jamie to a bus depot where she hides her baby. He then follows her to an old farm on the outskirts of Haddonfield, where he brutally kills her, but not before she's able to send out a distress signal to Dr. Loomis by calling into a late-night radio show. This catches the attention of Tommy Doyle, now living in the house across the street from the Myers house, where the next day he's able to rescue the baby before anyone else can find him. Loomis returns to Haddonfield to warn the Strodes of the danger they've put themselves in by moving into Michael's house. However, it's too late, and Michael kills the whole family except for Kara and Danny, who take refuge with Tommy across the street. Dr. Wynn shows up and kidnaps them, along with Jamie's baby, who Tommy had named Steven, where Tommy and Loomis then go go to Smith's Grove to rescue them. However, Michael is revealed to not actually be under the Thorn cult's control, and he kills Wynn and the other doctors before Tommy tranquilizes him and beats him with a lead pipe. Afterwards, Tommy, Kara, Danny, and baby Steven drive off into the night while Dr. Loomis stays behind to take care of unfinished business, where he presumably is killed by Michael off screen, as this timeline ends with the sounds of his screams as we see Michael's mask laying on the floor. When it comes to the Laurie timeline, the events of 1978 and earlier still apply, meaning that everything shown to us in Halloween and Halloween 2 are canon to the story. But instead of picking up with Halloween 4, this continuity will pass over all movies involving Jamie Lloyd and go directly to Halloween H2O, which is followed shortly thereafter by Halloween Resurrection. However, just as a quick reminder, Michael and Laurie are still siblings. Loomis tried to blow up Michael, and we last see Laurie as she's riding off in the back of an ambulance on November 1st, 1978. Just like the previous timeline, Loomis also survives the explosion at the hospital. However, the biggest difference here is that Michael's body is never found, and the authorities reason that the fire reduced him to a pile of ashes. In actuality, Michael had survived the blast and returned to the Myers house at 45 Lambkin Lane, where he made a subterranean dwelling for himself underneath the property. Based on the comic book series called The First Death of Laurie Strode, which bridges the gap between Halloween 2 and Halloween H2O, it's revealed that over the course of the next year, Laurie is continuously haunted by visions of Michael while she grows increasingly distant from her parents. This eventually leads her to fake her own death in an apparent automobile accident on October 31st, 1979, and with the help of Dr. Loomis and Marion Chambers, she's able to start her life over under a new identity, Carrie Tate. Over the course of the next year, she got involved with and married to an unnamed man, whose child she became pregnant with, and in August of 1981, she gave birth to her son, John Tate. Meanwhile, Loomis lived out the rest of his days under the care of Nurse Marion, and according to the short novel Halloween Sam, which takes place in this timeline, he died of a heart attack on February 2nd, 1995, which is also the same day that his portrayer Donald Pleasance had died in real life. Little is known about Laurie's life over the 17-year span that bridges Halloween 2 and H2O, except for the fact that her marriage ended, presumably due to John's father being an abusive, chain-smoking methadone addict, and at some point in the late 90s, she relocated to Summer Glen, California with John, where she took on the position of head mistress at Hillcrest Academy. However, Laurie never stopped having nightmares about Michael still being alive and tracking her down, which brings us to October 29th, 1998, where the events of H2O begin proper. Michael locates Marion's home in Langdon, Illinois, where after breaking in and rummaging through Loomis's old files, finds the information on Laurie Strode's whereabouts. He kills Marion and some neighbor kids and makes his journey across the country, where he ends up at Hillcrest Academy on Halloween, just in time to go after Laurie, John, and a small group of students and faculty who stay behind from an annual field trip to Yosemite. Laurie goes after Michael with an axe, but is unsuccessful in killing him, and when the police and paramedics arrive on the scene, nobody notices Michael switching places with one of the EMTs. With the EMT now wearing Michael's mask and having his larynx crushed by Michael before being knocked out, he's unable to alert anybody to what had happened, and when Laurie kidnaps him by hijacking the coroner's van, she chops off his head in a seriously unfortunate case of mistaken identity. Laurie is then taken into custody following the murder, and knowing that Michael is still out there and coming after her, she pretends to slip into a catatonic state so that she can be housed at a mental institution where she'll have more free reign than she would if she were placed in a prison. This will bring us to the events of Halloween Resurrection's opening scene, which take place 3 years later on Halloween night 2001. Michael finally comes for Laurie at the Grace Anderson Sanitarium, where unbeknownst to the staff, she's prepared a trap for Michael on the asylum's rooftop. Michael easily becomes ensnared by Laurie, however, not wanting to harm another innocent person, she hesitates to remove his mask before killing him. This allows Michael to gain the upper hand, where he's able to pull her over the side of the building and plunge a knife into her back. Realizing that she faced her fate and ultimately lost, Laurie kisses her brother and proclaims that she'll see him in hell before falling to her death several stories below. As John never reappears in the franchise, it is presumed that Laurie sent him into hiding before being institutionalized, but regardless, Michael was either never able to track him down or was only ever interested in killing Laurie, meaning that just like baby Steven in the Loomis timeline, John has now become the only living relative of Michael in the Laurie Timeline. In any event, Michael returns to Haddonfield following his killing of Laurie, and resumes living underneath his house for the next year, until Halloween night of 2002, when internet entrepreneur Freddie Harris broadcasts his Dangertainment livestream from inside Michael's childhood home. Over the course of the night, Michael kills everyone involved, except for Freddie and one of the cast members named Sarah Moyer, who are able to burn Michael alive when he gets tangled up in some electrical equipment. Once again burnt to a crisp, his body is taken to the Haddonfield morgue, where this timeline abruptly ends as we see Michael's eyes opening up, indicating him to still be alive. Now, remember that pin we dropped earlier? Well, this is going to be a very integral moment for the fifth and final timeline of the franchise, which again, I'm calling the Michael Timeline, which other than the original Halloween movie, will also include Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. However, before we can move forward, we're going to have to backtrack quite a bit, as like I had mentioned earlier, this timeline also diverges when we move through it backwards. So starting back at the first scene on Halloween night 1963, all of the events play out exactly the same as they're shown. However, there never was a Cynthia Myers hidden behind the scenes, as the Myers family only ever had two children, Judith and Michael, meaning that Laurie Strode in this timeline is biologically the daughter of Morgan and Pamela Strode, and just like Cynthia, would also have been 2 years old at the time of Judith's murder. This begins a completely alternate trajectory for the original movie, as even though everything shown to us can still be taken at face value, there are many differences in the story's DNA. For instance, after Michael is locked away at Smith's Grove, it's unclear what became of his parents, as they wouldn't have ever died in that automobile accident in 1965, meaning that they most likely moved away and never visited their son again. Most noticeably, however, Halloween 2 is no longer canon with the events that take place on Halloween night of 1978. So everything involving Michael, Laurie, Loomis, and Haddonfield Memorial Hospital never actually happens. Bearing that in mind, we can then view the events of Halloween 1978 once more, but looking at it through the lens of the Michael timeline, it's reason to believe that he was only ever drawn back to his childhood home, and that Laurie was just an unfortunate victim of circumstance for having been in the wrong place at the wrong time, thus becoming the object of his obsession for the remainder of the day. This will then bring us right back to the conclusion of the first movie, where after Loomis shoots Michael off of the Doyle balcony, he simply gets up and walks away. With the subsequent events depicted in the flashback segment of Halloween Kills, the entire Haddonfield Police Department is dispatched to search the town for Michael, at which point he's located by rookie officer Frank Hawkins. Michael eludes further gunfire, but is traced back to his house when Hawkins is joined by fellow officer Pete McCabe. It's here where Michael attacks McCabe, but Hawkins accidentally kills his partner while trying to save him, and Michael exits the house only to walk into a standoff between him, Dr. Loomis, and the entire Haddonfield police force. Loomis attempts to kill Michael, but he's ultimately stopped by Hawkins, and Michael is remanded back into custody and returned to Smith's Grove. Loomis's story in this timeline is much more ineffectual, as after the events of 1978, he stopped being Michael's doctor, and at some point over the years, his student Dr. Ranbir Sartain took over his post, and Loomis eventually passed away of natural causes, presumably at some point in the mid-90s. When it comes to Laurie, as was the case with the last two timelines, her life post-1978 is very vague at best. What we do know is that the following day, November 1st, 1978, she was sent back to school without any grief counseling, which triggered years of untreated PTSD, manifesting into a deep-seated trauma. This then brings us to the birth of her daughter, Karen Strode, in 1981, which according to the internet was the result of Laurie having a one-night stand with a stranger in a bar. However, Laurie is also said to have had 2 failed marriages, so it's unclear if Karen's father is separate from either one of those. In any event, Laurie projected her neuroses and paranoia onto Karen as a child, at which time Karen spent the early years of her life undergoing survival training until 1993, where Laurie was deemed by the state to be an unfit mother and lost custody of Karen. Karen lived out the rest of her adolescence in foster care and eventually met and got married to Ray Nelson after finishing high school, and in 2001 they gave birth to their first and only daughter, Allison Nelson. This will then bring us 17 years into the future, where the events of Halloween 2018 unfold on October 30th, when Michael escapes custody during a transfer to another facility. The next day on Halloween, he collects his old mask after killing 2 podcasters who had come into possession of it, and begins a new reign of terror on Haddonfield, 40 40 years after his original killing spree. Laurie, who believes Michael has returned for her, sets out to lure him into a trap, but he's eventually found and subdued by Hawkins and Sartain, who were in the process of bringing Allison to her parents at Laurie's house on the outskirts of town. Sartain betrays Hawkins, leaving him for dead, and drives an unconscious Michael to Laurie in hopes that the reunion will finally trigger him to speak. Michael wakes up before they arrive, however, where Allison is able to escape as he kills Sartain. He makes his way to Laurie's house where he kills Ray as well, but the Strode women are able to lock Michael in the basement, where the entire house is revealed to be a trap designed specifically to incinerate him. Halloween Kills then picks up immediately on the same night, where having suffered a stab wound from Michael, Laurie is brought to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital along with Karen and Allison. Hawkins, having survived his attack by Sartain, is also brought to the hospital, and firefighters are dispatched to Laurie's house to put out the fire, but they're all killed by Michael, who had survived the flames by hiding behind a steel door. Meanwhile, the townspeople led by Tommy Doyle organize a vigilante mob to kill Michael, where they mistakenly pursue and precipitate the death of another escaped mental patient, while the real Michael returns to his childhood home once again, which is now renovated and owned by a married couple who he kills. He's eventually found by Allison and Lonnie and Cameron Elam. However, Michael kills the Elams before Karen arrives in time to save her daughter. Stealing his mask, Karen uses it to lure Michael into another trap, where the mob surprises him before seemingly putting him down. However, he gets right back up and kills all of them, including Tommy and former Sheriff Lee Brackett, before returning to his house once again, where he murders Karen, who had gone to the upstairs window after seeing an apparition of young Michael Myers. After this, Michael disappears once again, leaving the town of Haddonfield to reel from yet another traumatic massacre. Moving ahead to 2019, the following Halloween, Corey Cunningham is hired to babysit Jeremy Allen while his parents go to a costume party. However, the night turns disastrous after Jeremy plays a prank on Corey that results in him accidentally falling to his death. After this, Corey becomes the town pariah as a way for the people to displace their anger towards Michael. Meanwhile, Laurie buys a new home in which she moves into with Allison, at which time she begins to undergo therapy for the years of untreated PTSD. Over the course of the next 3 years, Laurie seems to heal from her trauma and is busy writing her memoir, until 2022 when she first meets Corey Cunningham. After initially trying to set him up on a date with Allison, she begins to see the same darkness in his eyes which she had originally saw in Michael. Unbeknownst to Laurie, however, Corey had previously had an encounter with Michael, who now in a weakened state has been dwelling in the sewers of Haddonfield. Recognizing the darkness in Corey's eyes as well, Michael allows Corey to live, which then precipitates Corey to first lure victims to Michael in the sewer, but then full-on assist him in killing people around town. Laurie eventually stops Corey, who has now fully become the Shape after stealing Michael's mask and breaking into her house. However, Michael arrives as well, where he decides to end his partnership with Corey and reclaim his mask. Michael and Laurie engage in a final battle to the death where Laurie is almost killed, but Allison shows up to save her, and after slitting Michael's throat and wrist, the two watch as he bleeds out on Laurie's kitchen counter. However, they're not content that he's dead enough, and with the acceptance and participation of the Haddonfield Police Department, Michael's body is taken to the local junkyard where he's tossed into an industrial shredder as the entire town watches as his body is completely chewed up, destroying it for good. The next day, Allison leaves Haddonfield to start a new chapter in her life, and this timeline officially ends as Laurie finishes work on her memoir, only to be visited by Hawkins with the prospect of finally living out a happy existence. And there you have it, all 5 timelines in this extremely convoluted mess of a franchise. I want to thank a few of my Patreon supporters like Timbo Slice, Jason Evans, Tim McKay, and Jackie Simmons. If you enjoyed this timeline video, you can check out this one right here for the HELLRAISER franchise. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.